All you ever wanted was to feel close to someone. At first, that closeness feels warm, even safe. You lean in, your heart searching for connection. But then something shifts. What once felt like comfort now feels like a threat. Your chest tightens, your breath grows shallow, and before you realize it, your instincts whisper one thing: pull back. It's not that you don't care. It's not that you don't want love. It's that closeness feels risky. And with that risk comes guilt, confusion, and the quiet voice inside asking, why can't I just let them in? If you've ever felt this, you are not alone. In fact, this is the unspoken reality for many people who live with avoidant tendencies or even avoidant personality disorder. And yet, this experience is rarely understood by the people around them. Outsiders may call it coldness, indifference, or emotional distance. But what if the truth is something very different? What if avoidance is not about being heartless at all, but about trying desperately to feel safe? Today, we're going to step inside the secret life of the avoidant mind, not through a clinical checklist, not through cold definitions, but through lived stories, scientific insights, and compassionate reflection. Because behind every wall of avoidance is not a lack of love, it's a longing for it, wrapped in fear. When psychologists first studied avoidant attachment and later avoidant personality disorder, they noticed something consistent. Many people who struggle with avoidance were shaped by early experiences of criticism, rejection, or emotional neglect. Imagine a child who reaches for comfort, but instead of warmth receives withdrawal. Imagine a child whose mistakes are magnified, whose needs are dismissed, or who is met with unpredictable care. Over time, that child's nervous system learns a painful lesson. Closeness is unsafe. Vulnerability is dangerous. And so, the young heart builds walls, not to reject others, but to survive. I remember working with a young man, we'll call him Daniel, who described relationships as standing in front of a door he desperately wanted to open, but his hands would freeze on the handle. It's like I'm watching myself from the outside, he said. They're right there. They're smiling. They want to know me. And instead of stepping in, I find myself stepping back. Then I feel awful about it. I don't want to hurt them, but I can't stop myself either. Daniel's words reveal the push-pull dynamic at the heart of avoidance. It is not indifference. It is conflict. The heart longs for intimacy, but the body braces for danger. Every compliment feels suspicious. Every moment of closeness feels like the beginning of loss. And so, avoidant people find themselves locked in cycles of yearning and retreating, connection and withdrawal. A cycle that leaves both them and their loved ones confused and hurting. Research shows that people with AVPD often report some of the lowest self-esteem levels measured in psychology. For them, self-doubt is not a fleeting insecurity. It is the constant background noise of their inner world. That quiet voice whispering, "You're not enough." Why would they stay? Why would they love you? Becomes so familiar that it shapes their entire experience of relationships. To be seen feels risky, because what if being seen means being judged, or worse, abandoned? I once heard a woman named Lila describe it like this. It's like carrying around a fragile glass heart. I want someone to hold it, but every time someone reaches out, I imagine them dropping it. And so I pull away, not because I don't want love, but because I'm terrified of the shattering. Stories like Daniel's and Lila's echo a deeper truth. Avoidance is a strategy, a survival instinct. And survival instincts are not born out of weakness, but out of strength. When a child learns that closeness equals pain, distance becomes armor. That armor over time can start to feel like part of the self. And so, many avoidant people grow into adults who crave connection, yet feel safer without it. But here's something important. This armor is not permanent. The human brain, shaped as it is by early experiences, also carries remarkable capacity for change. Neuroplasticity, the ability of the brain to form new patterns, means that even deeply ingrained avoidant patterns can be softened, reshaped, and healed. This doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't happen through sheer willpower. It happens through awareness, compassion, and safe relationships. And yet, awareness is often the hardest part. Because avoidance is tricky, it disguises itself. It tells you you're fine on your own. It convinces you that needing others is weakness. It paints independence as strength when in reality, that independence is often a shield against loneliness. Let's pause here for a moment. If you are listening and you recognize yourself in these words, notice how your body feels right now. Maybe your chest tightens. Maybe you're resisting the urge to dismiss this. That's okay. This reaction is part of the avoidant pattern itself, the instinct to turn away when something feels too vulnerable. But remember, listening doesn't mean surrendering. It just means allowing yourself to be curious about your own inner world. Avoidance shows up in many ways. Sometimes it's subtle, ignoring a text, downplaying your feelings, telling yourself it's not a big deal when it actually is. Other times, it's more obvious, canceling plans last minute, shutting down in arguments, or ending relationships the moment they get too close. To the outside world, these behaviors look like rejection, but to the avoidant mind, they feel like protection. There's a story of a man named Aaron who broke up with someone he loved deeply after just 6 months. When asked why, he said, "I couldn't breathe. Every time she said she loved me, it felt like a trap. I wanted to believe her, but all I could think was, soon she'll see the real me. Soon she'll leave. Better I end it first." Aaron's story captures the essence of avoidant hyper-awareness. Every pause in conversation feels loaded. Every change in tone feels threatening. The avoidant mind scans constantly for danger, like walking a tightrope, waiting for the slip. This vigilance is exhausting, but it's also why closeness feels impossible. How can you relax into love when your mind is always preparing for loss? Science backs this up. Studies show that people with AVPD not only struggle with low self-esteem, but also with heightened emotional sensitivity. Brain imaging research reveals that regions involved in emotional regulation can become overactive under stress, making even small conflicts feel overwhelming. This is why avoidant people often describe emotions as too much. It's not exaggeration, it's neurobiology. And yet, the story doesn't end there, because avoidance is not hopeless. With the right awareness and support, avoidant people can begin to rewrite their patterns. In fact, some of the most courageous journeys I've witnessed are those of avoidant individuals learning, slowly and gently, to let love in. There was once a woman I worked with, let's call her Maya, who told me she had never said the words, "I need you," to anyone. The idea itself felt suffocating. But over time, in therapy, she practiced. First, she whispered it to herself in the mirror. Then she wrote it in a journal. Finally, one day she told her partner, "I need you." She cried as she said it, terrified of rejection. But instead of leaving, her partner simply held her hand. That moment, Maya said, was the beginning of a new chapter. Not a cure, not a complete transformation, but the first crack in the armor, a glimpse of possibility. This is why understanding avoidance matters, not just for those who live with it, but for those who love them. Because the avoidant person is not cold or unfeeling. They are navigating an internal storm where love feels like both salvation and danger. And if we can see them with compassion, if we can recognize that their withdrawal is not rejection, but fear, then maybe we can create the kind of relationships where healing feels possible. As we continue deeper into this journey, we'll explore not only the struggles avoidant people face, but also the strengths they carry. Because beneath the fear of rejection lies resilience. Beneath the walls lies sensitivity. And beneath the silence lies a heart that has always wanted to be understood. And if you are listening now and you've ever felt broken for struggling with closeness, hear this. You are not broken. You are not heartless. You are human. And your patterns, while protective, do not define your future. Healing is possible, and connection, even if it feels far away, remains within reach. Closeness has always carried both promise and danger for the avoidant mind. But as we peel back the layers, we begin to see that avoidance is not just about fear, it's also about longing. Beneath every retreat is the quiet ache of wanting to stay. And it's in this paradox that the avoidant experience becomes both deeply human and profoundly complex. One of the most misunderstood aspects of avoidance is how deeply it is tied to self-worth. To the outside world, the avoidant person may look confident, even self-sufficient. But inside, they often carry a constant hum of doubt. Compliments are dismissed as flattery. Kindness is second-guessed. Every gesture of closeness feels like it must have strings attached. And when someone says, "I love you," the avoidant mind quietly responds, "But for how long?" Take the story of Elena, who shared with me how even in the happiest moments of her relationship, she felt a shadow creeping in. "It's like a voice in the back of my head," she explained. "Even when things are going well, I'm waiting for the moment it falls apart. And because I'm waiting, I can't enjoy what's right in front of me." This hyper-awareness is not a choice. It's a survival reflex. The avoidant brain has been trained to anticipate danger, to look for the cracks before the floor gives way. But the tragedy is that in preparing for loss, the avoidant person often loses the very closeness they crave. Another hallmark of avoidance is the fear of being a burden. For many avoidant individuals, asking for help feels almost unbearable. Somewhere deep down, they learned the message that their needs were too much, or that leaning on others would lead to disappointment. As a result, they grow into adults who swallow their pain, smile when they're hurting, and quietly hope someone will notice without them having to ask. I once knew a man named Chris who described himself as the strong one in his family. Whenever his siblings cried, he comforted them. Whenever his parents fought, he distracted them. But when he felt afraid, or sad, or overwhelmed, he kept it inside. Years later, in his marriage, this same pattern repeated. He never admitted when he was struggling, and when his wife asked if he was okay, he always said, "I'm fine." Inside, though, he longed for her to see past the mask. But the fear of being too much kept him silent. What Chris eventually discovered in therapy was that his silence wasn't strength, it was armor. And like all armor, it kept him safe, but also kept him distant. When he finally allowed himself to say, "I'm not okay, and I need you," it was terrifying. But it also became the turning point in his relationship. Because vulnerability, though frightening, is the bridge that allows real intimacy to grow. The avoidant experience is also shaped by how overwhelming emotions can feel. Fear, sadness, joy. Any of these can register as too much. The avoidant person may not lack feeling. In fact, they often feel everything too deeply. The problem is not absence of emotion, but intensity. And so, when faced with strong feelings, they may shut down, withdraw, or numb out as a way to cope. Imagine trying to drink from a fire hose. That's how emotions can feel for someone with avoidant tendencies. Even love, something they long for, can feel like it's flooding them beyond capacity. And so, paradoxically, they step back, not because they don't want love, but because they feel they can't survive it. This is why avoidant people are often misunderstood as cold or uncaring. In reality, they may care so much that the intensity frightens them. Their withdrawal is not the absence of love, but the fear of drowning in it. If we return to the metaphor of armor, we see both the challenge and the possibility. Armor protects, but it also isolates. To take off the armor is to risk exposure, but it's also the only way to be touched. Healing for the avoidant person is not about tearing the armor off in one dramatic gesture. It's about loosening it, piece by piece, in safe and steady ways. For Maya, the woman who struggled to say, "I need you," healing began with small steps. For Daniel, who froze at the doorway of intimacy, it meant learning to pause and name his fear instead of automatically retreating. For Chris, it meant realizing that strength was not silence but honesty. Each of these journeys shows that avoidance is not a life sentence. It's a pattern, and patterns can change. The truth is, avoidant people carry unique strengths too. Their sensitivity makes them attuned observers of the world. Their independence allows them to survive in environments that others might not. Their longing for connection, though hidden, means that when they do choose intimacy, it often comes with depth and sincerity. These are not broken people. They are people who learn to protect themselves in ways that once made sense, even if those ways no longer serve them now. As we continue this exploration, remember, the avoidant person is not defined by distance alone. They are defined by the courage it takes to long for love even when love has felt dangerous. They are defined by the small, brave steps they take to trust again, to hope again, to let someone in even just a little. And if you recognize yourself in these stories, let this be a reminder. Your avoidance does not mean you are unworthy of love. It means you were hurt in ways that taught you to guard your heart. And while those lessons may feel permanent, they are not. Healing is not only possible, it is already happening. In every moment, you choose curiosity over retreat, honesty over silence, hope over fear. This is the quiet revolution of the avoidant mind. Not to erase the fear, but to live alongside it. Not to tear down every wall at once, but to let a little light in through the cracks. And in doing so, to discover that the very closeness you once feared may become the very closeness that helps you heal. The avoidant mind does not exist in a vacuum. It reveals itself most vividly in the presence of others, partners, friends, co-workers, even strangers. This is both the source of its struggle and its paradox. What it fears is also what it longs for most. Take the story of Elena, a woman in her 20s who described her romantic life as a trail of unfinished beginnings. She would enter relationships with spark and hope, laughing freely, showing warmth, even daring to dream. But the moment things became serious, a switch flipped. Calls went unanswered. Messages sat unopened. Plans were postponed until they dissolved. To her partners, Elena seemed careless, even cruel. But inside, she described a very different reality. The moment someone sees me, really sees me, I feel exposed. I panic. I tell myself it's better to disappear before they find out who I really am. I don't stop because I want to. I stop because I'm scared. This is a common avoidant pattern, leaving first. Psychologists call it anticipatory rejection, abandoning someone before they abandon you. It is a twisted form of protection, a way to escape the pain of loss by delivering it yourself. Yet in doing so, the avoidant person recreates the very loneliness they are running from. The logic is harsh but seductive. Better lonely than betrayed. Chris, a teacher in his mid-30s, offered another window into avoidance. Unlike Elena, he did not leave. He stayed married to a woman he deeply loved. But his avoidance appeared in subtler ways. During conflict, when his wife asked what he was feeling, he froze. "It's like my brain shuts off," he said. "I'm still there, I hear her, but I can't speak. It looks like I don't care, but inside, I'm overwhelmed, drowning in feelings I don't know how to express. Chris's description reflects a well-documented truth about avoidance. Silence often masks us overload. What looks like emptiness is actually overflow. Neuroscience backs this up. Research shows that avoidant individuals often experience heightened activity in fear and threat regions of the brain. They are not numb. They are flooded. The nervous system, desperate to regulate, slams the door shut. For partners, this silence can feel unbearable. Many describe it as being locked out in the cold. They reach, but the avoidant partner withdraws. They demand answers, but words do not come. To them, it looks like rejection. To the avoidant mind, it feels like survival. This pattern ripples outward. In friendships, avoidant people often become the listener rather than the sharer. They can be loyal, supportive, even fun, but their own struggles remain hidden. Friends describe them as strong, independent, or low maintenance. In truth, they are practicing a subtler form of hiding, to be needed without needing, because to admit need is to admit risk. In professional life, avoidance shows up as excessive independence. Avoidant individuals may decline collaboration, avoid feedback, or turn down promotions, not out of laziness or lack of ability, but because being noticed feels threatening. If I stay small, one client explained, I stay safe. Visibility feels like danger. Here, avoidance not only shapes relationships but life choices. Careers stall, friendships plateau, potential remains untapped. The instinct that once protected now limits. And yet, avoidance is not only struggle. Within its patterns lie hidden strengths. The same vigilance that fuels suspicion also sharpens perception. Avoidant individuals often notice what others miss. The pause in a friend's voice, the subtle shift in a colleague's body language, the unspoken tension in a room. While this hyper-awareness can fuel anxiety, it can also become empathy, intuition, and artistry. Sarah, a painter, described her avoidance as loneliness she could never escape. But it also gave her art its depth. She painted portraits not only of faces but of emotions behind them. The sorrow, the hesitation, the longing. It hurts to always feel apart, she said. But maybe it's also why I can see so much. Avoidance, then, is not a lack of humanity. It is a different way of being human, one that carries both cost and gift. The greatest cost, though, is loneliness. Not the loneliness of isolation, but the loneliness of being unseen, even in the company of others. You might sit at the dinner table, laugh at the jokes, join in the stories, and yet feel a pane of glass between you and everyone else. That glass is invisible to others, but painfully solid to you. This loneliness often carries shame. Avoidant people know they are building the wall. They feel responsible for their own isolation. Why am I like this? They ask. Why can't I just let people in? Why do I ruin things? And shame, in turn, strengthens the cycle. The lonelier you feel, the more you hide. The more you hide, the lonelier you become. But avoidance does not have to be permanent. Walls can be lowered, not torn down overnight, but softened, brick by brick. Julian's story illustrates this. Raised by a father whose love was conditional, Julian learned early that mistakes were dangerous. As an adult, he avoided intimacy at all costs, but in therapy, he began experimenting with small acts of honesty. Not dramatic confessions, but quiet truths. I'm scared right now. I feel like running, but I don't want to. At first, even these words felt unbearable. His chest tightened, his throat closed, but he practiced. And over time, he discovered something new. Honesty did not always lead to rejection. Sometimes it created closeness instead. Julian still struggles, but he is no longer defined by avoidance alone. His story reminds us that patterns are not destiny. What is learned can be unlearned. What was once armor can be set aside. So what do avoidant individuals wish others knew? That their retreat is not rejection, but fear. That their silence is not emptiness, but overwhelm. That their distance is not a lack of love, but an attempt to protect the love they feel. They wish you knew they care, sometimes so much that it hurts. And perhaps most of all, they wish for patience. Patience from others, but also patience from themselves. Avoidance is not a flaw to be erased, but a wound to be understood. Healing it takes time. Trust grows slowly, like a seed that pushes through soil, fragile but persistent. If you recognize yourself here, take this with you. Avoidance is not who you are. It is what you learned. And if you learned it, you can also learn something new. You may never become someone who finds intimacy effortless, and that's okay. But you can become someone who takes one step closer than yesterday. Someone who stays a little longer before pulling away. Someone who whispers, even through trembling lips, I want closeness, even if I'm afraid. Because the secret of the avoidant mind is not absence. It is longing. Longing that, when met with compassion, can become the beginning of connection. Healing from avoidance is not about erasing the past, but about learning to live differently with it. For many, this means finding ways to sit with discomfort instead of fleeing from it, and slowly practicing what it feels like to stay open. Healing rarely looks like a sudden transformation. It is often a quiet, gradual shift, made of small steps repeated over time. One of the first steps is awareness. Simply noticing the moment you want to withdraw is powerful. Imagine you're in a conversation and suddenly the urge to shut down rises. Instead of disappearing emotionally, what if you just acknowledged it internally? I feel like pulling back right now. I feel unsafe. That simple act of naming the feeling brings it out of the shadows. You are no longer running unconsciously. You are watching, observing, choosing. Another step is gentleness. Avoidant people often carry deep guilt about their patterns. They scold themselves for not being more open, for hurting people they care about, for sabotaging what they most want. But guilt rarely heals. It only adds another layer of shame. Gentleness, on the other hand, opens a door. To say to yourself, I am not broken. I am learning. My fear makes sense. That kind of compassion softens the armor. And when the armor softens, connection becomes just a little more possible. Therapy is one of the safest places to practice this. With a skilled professional, an avoidant person can begin to experience what it's like to be seen without judgment, to be held in the moments of fear, and to discover that vulnerability does not always lead to rejection. But therapy is not the only path. Safe friendships, patient partners, and even communities like this one, where people talk openly about avoidance, can all become part of the healing process. Let me share a final story. A man named Jonah once told me that for years, he never said I love you without following it with a joke. The words felt too heavy, too risky, so he would hide them under humor. One day, after months of reflection and slow steps in therapy, he decided to try something new. He looked at his partner and said the words, plain and simple, without a mask. I love you. His voice shook. He expected silence or rejection. Instead, his partner smiled and said it back. Jonah cried, not because he was weak, but because for the first time he had allowed himself to stand unguarded and discovered he was safe. That is what healing looks like. Not perfection, not the absence of fear, but the courage to take one small risk, then another, and another, to let yourself be seen, piece by piece, until the armor is no longer needed. So as we close this journey, let's return to where we began. that longing for closeness, that ache to be understood. If you have ever felt torn between craving connection and fearing it, know this: you are not alone, and you are not broken. Avoidance is not your identity. It is a strategy your younger self created to survive. And now, as an adult, you have the chance to choose differently. On this channel, dear Avoidant, we believe in telling these stories not just to explain, but to remind you of your strength. Your hesitation is not proof of weakness. It is proof of how deeply you care. And the fact that you're here, listening, learning, is already a step toward change. So, what's the takeaway? Healing begins when you stop fighting against your avoidant patterns as if they are enemies, and start seeing them as protectors who once served you, but who no longer need to run your life. You can thank them, honor them, and slowly, gently, set them down. Because beyond the armor, beyond the fear, there is still a heart that wants to love and to be loved. If you carry nothing else from this video, carry this. You are worthy of closeness even when it feels unsafe. You are worthy of love even when you doubt it. And you are not defined by your avoidance. You are defined by your courage to keep trying, to keep reaching, and to keep believing that connection is possible.